Hello, and welcome to our panel, Preparing the Next Generation of Global Leaders. In this digital age, we're seeing a big change in the landscape of environmentalism, leadership, community, everything, basically. We have access to more training, more resources, more information, which is great. But we're also constantly being bombarded with news and more information than really any one brain can handle. We're in a distinctly global period where we are more connected than ever before. We're also seeing a very distinct group of global leaders start to emerge who had a key part of their childhood, their adolescence, their emerging adulthood directly shaped by the COVID pandemic. While there were some social and emotional learning opportunities cut short for them, we are also seeing an incredible fire in this generation that is coming up. They have a huge thirst for justice and really an inability to accept the systems that have failed them. Instead, they're seeking meaningful change. And I am so thrilled because we have a fascinating group of people from all different backgrounds who are going to be speaking about this. What does it look like to inspire, to equip, to prepare, to be beside this next generation of emerging global leaders? I'd love to introduce you all. If we could go around and say your name, your pronouns if you wish, maybe your role at your organization, the work that you're doing. And if you have any history with EarthCorps, feel free to share a little bit about that too.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alisha Hurst. I use she, her pronouns. I am based in Tucson, Arizona, and I work for a local education nonprofit that does environmental education for elementary, middle, and high schools in conjunction with Tucson area schools. And I'm really excited to be here with you guys today.
Hi guys, my name is Badral Yondon. I'm from Mongolia, based in Mongolia. I help run, together with my colleagues in the board of directors, a local NGO called the Mongol Ecology Center. And we focus on national parks of Mongolia, and really happy to be part of this panel.
Hello, everyone. My name is Linder. I use she, her pronouns. I am the core operations manager at EarthCorps, so heavily involved with EarthCorps. Some of my role involves helping out with daily logistics, any core dynamics that may present itself, and grant compliance protocols. But the ultimate goal for my role is to ensure that core member experience is thriving. And so helping with any feedback and ensuring that implementation happens. And I'm also super excited to be here.
Hi, everyone. My name is Gigi Gaultier. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a career counselor at the University of San Diego. My background is in marine biology, and I used to work a lot with youth climate action programs at the Seattle Aquarium, at the Woodland Park Zoo in Seattle. But now being based in San Diego, a lot of my work is focused on leadership development, career exploration, and helping folks who are interested in environmental and ocean sciences get involved, whether that is through resume revision, career exploration, finding that next step for them. And it's a very rewarding piece of work. So I'm very excited to be here and getting to learn from all of you as well.
Thank you all. I'd love to break the ice a little bit. So I want to throw a question to everyone. Could you tell us about a leader who made a big impact in your life?
I don't know if we're going in the same order, but I can start. I thought immediately of when I was a kid. I did musical theater, and I had a director who was just really awesome, really personable, and really empowered, and gave me the confidence to be on stage and learn how to be in front of people and be comfortable in front of people. And she was a really great, personable leader, and I really look up to her.
I guess we'll just follow the same order. Personally, I guess growing up in in rural Mongolia, the personal hero for me was my grandma. Mongolia back then was a socialist, or we refer to as communist country, and the propaganda, everything was somewhat a bit of an issue. But my grandma, she always lived by her beliefs and didn't care about any repercussions. I mean, obviously, she cared about the family and safety of it, but in general, she just stayed true to her beliefs, and I think that she really helped me to, to be loyal to my instincts and beliefs, and more so also being very open-minded and being able to adapt to new challenges. So yeah.
Follow the same cadence. I can go next. Someone who's heavily impacted my life in a positive way is definitely my older sister, Alex. She has not only impacted some of the values that I hold within like my professional career, but she's also impacted my career pathway, which is kind of surprising. She worked in nonprofit and has been working in nonprofit for a long time, and she's made her way up to program director. And she always emphasized how important it was to focus on the people and to promote and build people up. And so I always thought that that was really cool, but I wanted to work with plants, and that's what I did for a while. I worked with plants for about 4 years and was a biologist in a multitude of ways. But then shortly after my 4th year, started realizing that I did want to delve into this component of building people up. And so I took some of her word and I decided to completely change my career. And I applied for an advocate role at Heart of Oregon Corps, which is a nonprofit in Oregon. And it has completely changed my career pathway, but I absolutely love it and cherish my older sister tremendously for all the impact she's had on me.
Awesome. I'll take us home here. I thought of one of my youth engagement mentors who I had when I volunteered at the Seattle Aquarium in high school. This individual was so incredible at just believing in people, even when you didn't really believe in yourself. And she was also very passionate about increasing equity and accessibility within environmental fields. And that sparked a huge passion for me. And so the way that she intentionally kind of broke down a lot of those barriers and reached out to those lower income communities of color, to build and kind of transform the historical narrative that had been seen in environmental fields, particularly at a very expensive aquarium, and so that sparked a huge interest for me, in the way that she drove through her own passion and shared that with others is something that has transformed the way that I lead in my life and the work that I do now by storytelling and sharing with others my passion as well.
Thank you all. It was really interesting to hear a through line through everyone's story. This person who influenced them, I can just see the way that your careers have lined up in such a way that you're now ready to influence others in the same way. And there's something so special to me about the cyclical nature of mentorship, that it doesn't end in one place or another, that those who are mentored tend to go on to mentor others. And I'm really thankful for you all for sharing some of those special memories with us. Alisha, I'd love to kick it to you. I want to hear a little bit more about this work that you do. Can you tell us about the age range that you're working with, the type of content that you're delivering? What tends to be the focus as you're really starting to build this foundation of knowledge?
Yeah, thanks, Brandon. So I will speak from my own personal experience, and then there are also a number of other educator presenters, my colleagues that will be on slightly different programs and slightly different ages. So I'll try to touch on that as well. But I personally work with 1st to 3rd graders, and I'm just now getting trained on our curriculum for 4th and 5th grade. And the program that I'm on is specifically targeting water, which, as you can imagine, in the desert Southwest is a very relevant topic right now, especially with some changes happening with the Colorado River. I mean, that's not just the desert Southwest, that's all of the West. But so the way it works, we partner with the schools. There's some pre-curriculum or pre-visit curriculum that the teachers have content to review with the kids. And then we come in and do about an hour presentation with them. And some of the stuff we focus on, we talk about the water cycle. So with first to third grade, it's very basic, like very intro to science type content. So we talk about the water cycle. We talk about what a natural resource is, a renewable resources versus non-renewable. We get into a little bit of the water history, specifically here in Tucson, which is something I love about the organization that I work for. It's like very local and very specific to our region, which is, you know, a pretty distinct region in the United States. And then we talk a little bit about the mechanics of how water gets to, you know, their schools and their homes and all the background, what has to happen for that water to get there. And then we talk about water conservation as a broad topic, and also specifically what they as kids can do to begin practicing water conservation. So it's very literal at that age. So, you know, we're not talking about reducing your meat consumption or, you know, buying organic or whatever, you know, more theoretical ideas. It's very much, we talk about turning the faucet off when you're brushing your teeth, and not leaving the hose running, and just very practical things like that. But I think the vision and the hope is that starting to talk to these kids really young and introducing them to these ideas as they develop and they're capable of understanding more abstract ideas, that they'll start to connect the dots a little bit. And then we have further curriculum as they age. There's other curriculum that goes into more detail and gets into a little bit more of those theoretics. So I already forgot. Did I answer everything?
Yes, you totally
Okay,
did.
perfect.
I'd love, if you don't mind, to share a little bit more about this model of you're a nonprofit who's going into the school system. So there's clearly a partnership there that's pretty interesting. Especially in the United States, funding for schools can really be tricky. Can you tell me a little bit more about how that partnership blossoms?
Yeah, this was a total mystery to me because I thought I knew all the environmental nonprofits in Tucson when I moved here a couple years ago. And then I found this one this summer and I was like, how have I never heard of this? But the way that it works is we actually have partnerships with a number of other organizations and companies. So for example, when I'm going into the schools, I'm going on behalf of Tucson Water, our local water utility. And so they're contributing to the funding for designing the curriculum and paying the educators. So I'm not privy to, you know, all the details of the financials and things like that, but a lot of our funding is not coming from the school, it's coming from other parties. So we also partner with the local electric utility, and we do like a whole renewable energy, energy conservation curriculum. There's like a recycling, we partner with the a MRF materials recovery facility and our local landfill, and we do like a whole recycling unit. So the nonprofit I work for doesn't do any marketing of their name. They're not really trying to, you know, get their name out there or advertise or fundraise or anything like that. It's all through partnerships, and then we represent those organizations going into the schools.
Wow, that is a fascinating model to me of really a collaboration between three very distinct entities that are coming together for like this common purpose. I want to ask you like 1,000 questions about that, but I also want to throw it to Chris because I want to age up these people a little bit. We're starting with first through third graders, and suddenly we're seeing high school and college grads over at EarthCorps when we get them and we get to start discussing these big picture ideas with them. Chris, you do this amazing work. You're helping, you're really the face of like what the program is with these people that are coming to EarthCorps. They come for a year-long educational and professional development service volunteer program where they're doing 1,000 different things. They're learning in the field, they're getting some education, they're figuring out what team dynamics and leadership look like with peers. And I'm really curious to hear from you a little bit more about what initiatives feel like they've been particularly valuable to the core program? Are there specific, I don't know, areas of education or specific frameworks that you like to give folks, that it feels like you're really preparing them for the next phase in their career? Because that's ultimately what EarthCorps is here for. We're here to bring in people who are passionate and have them leave ready to enter the field. So what different initiatives are you seeing success in the core program?
Yeah, this is sort of a hard question because I feel like there's a multitude of initiatives that I want to shed light on, but in the interest of time, I'll keep it down just to two. And so those two are something that I think EarthCorps does that is incredibly helpful is wanting to balance hard skills and soft skills and training on both of those. And then the other thing too is this idea of experiential learning. And so with hard skills, I think that's self-explanatory. The more hard skills you have on a resume, the more marketable you are to a future employer. Hard skills are everything, and EarthCorps provides a lot of important hard skills for the restoration field. So like herbicide application experience, wilderness first responder certifications, experience with trail restoration, etc. But EarthCorps really prides itself in also balancing soft skills. And so that comes out through our workshops. We have workshops, bi-weekly workshops, where we go over different soft skills. And so soft skills can range from talking about community, different relationships, rapport building, why that's important. Yeah, just a multitude of soft skills that I think are incredibly important. And that is just as important, is arguably just as important as hard skills. Maybe you can't necessarily put it on a resume, but you can use the hard skills to kind of catch the attention of a future employer and use the soft skills to really reel them in. And yeah, I think that that's a really cool part of EarthCorps. And then the second component is this idea of experiential learning. And so EarthCorps, it's a framework that EarthCorps likes to utilize, which is staff sort of build the structure and provide the knowledge, and is ultimately up to the core member to decide how much they gain out of this program. And so what I think is really cool about that is that it promotes these two important concepts that I think are incredibly important in professionalism, which is lifelong learning. You're always learning. You want to improve always. And then it's also this idea of failing forward. So we give people skills that they can practice every day and choose to practice every day, and they can fail, and that's okay, because then they can come back the next day and try again. So yeah, those are two.
Man, failing forward, what a good phrase, and probably a hard thing to do. I imagine in your role, you're doing a lot of emotional support. Is that true, that you're helping them kind of navigate that, what it means to fail and how to actually do it forward?
Yep. Yeah. Yep. And having a lot of opportunity for reflection when it comes to that as well. Reflection is another key component of experiential learning. It's another tool in the toolbox. And so, yeah, just providing opportunities for that, whether it be workshop, one-on-one check-ins, is really helpful and beneficial.
I love that. Reflection is so meaningful, and yet I think a lot of times, especially in nonprofits, you'd think nonprofits might be different than the corporate world, but in a lot of nonprofits, people are going, doing multiple jobs at once, wearing a lot of different hats, and we can forget to stop and think and reflect on what we're doing and how maybe that could change, or how it's succeeding. Thanks, Chris. I really appreciate that. It's such a perfect segue that you were just talking about these hard skills, these soft skills, really getting people to be able to emerge from the program ready to take on the challenges that they may see. And Gigi, you are kind of doing a similar thing. Some people come to EarthCorps before college, some after college, some instead of college. But I'm curious, from your perspective as a career counselor, you see everything from resume writing to those, I'm sure, teary conferences where you're navigating a career crisis with someone. I'd really love to hear from you, especially with your background in marine biology. Are you noticing any like specific challenges that your students are seeking as they're looking into a career path in environmentalism, or maybe even at large? Are there any kind of themes you're noticing that are beginning to emerge?
Yeah, when I first saw this question, my immediate thought was the reality is that the job market is really hard right now. And I'm not going to sugarcoat that at all, because I actually think it helps for folks to hear that and to feel prepared to head into that. We see a lot of very qualified students who are still struggling to land a job after graduation or find an internship that vibes with their passions. And they might not even know all of the options that are out there. I know for myself, I'm like, okay, marine biology, what can I do with that? Teaching, research, that was it. That's all I thought about. But there's so much more you can do with that. Obviously, I made a huge jump from marine biology to leadership education to career counseling. And really when I see students who are kind of in that challenge phase of whether it's career exploration or what's that next step I need to take, usually my biggest advice is to get involved early and often. And there's a lot of different ways to do that, whatever age you're in. I mean, we're hearing some amazing involvements from, kids in the third grade to high school to college, and even beyond that, doing volunteering, internships, clubs, even just attending little workshops or conferences here and there. And what this does for those students or those individuals is to gain that experience, one, so that's something to put on your resume, gaining the skills that you need. And Chris, you said it so beautifully, the differences between those hard skills and the soft skills. I sometimes kind of think of that as the hard skills are kind of trainable. Things like, I can learn slowly how to use Google Suite, or I can learn how to, code in Python. And those soft skills are almost like personality traits. And so that can be practiced over time as well. And a lot of times those experiences can give them exposure to learning both of those areas, but also things outside of the classroom that help in that direction. So, but beyond that, getting involved can help you build a network and also solidify or fine tune what those passions in the field are. So when I'm working with students who are having a hard time with that next step or figuring out what their options are, you never realize when someone next to you is someone interning at a place that you want to intern at, or sharing those stories with them. And so I would definitely recommend that to a lot of students wherever you're at, or individuals wherever you're at. There's a lot of ways to get involved or reach out to find volunteering. And that can overcome those challenges through those networks, through those experiences, things to put on your resume. But the last thing I'll mention here with challenges is we are seeing more than ever a trend of individuals switching their careers more often. That's becoming very trendy these days. And a lot of times people are spending 6 months, even a year in a single job, and then they switch over to another organization or employer. And so as you are building those hard and soft skills, be thinking about transferable skills. If you are someone who maybe you start out in research, but later you want to head into policy advocacy, think about what those transferable skills are. And there's a lot of ways to get connected for figuring out how to discuss those transferable skills, which we can always get into later, but I'll pause there.
Yeah, transferable skills. I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think we've already seen that in a couple of ways that people have talked about their trajectory just on this panel. I think of Chris talking about a background in biology and now is doing this totally different thing, but it's also not, because she gained so many competencies during that time that allow her to kind of tackle these new problems in an interesting way. Gigi, I'd love to ask you, I love this advice of getting involved and building your network. Do you have any advice to someone who feels like they're at their bandwidth, or feels like they're not getting the rest or human sustainability that they need? College specifically can be a time where you're doing so many things. And then after college, you realize I couldn't do so many things ever again. But then there are also folks in college who are like, my class load is enough, and I'm also working a part-time or a full-time job to try to afford this degree. And I think that's applicable to really anyone in a career that is maybe looking for a career change or just looking for community involvement. I'm just curious if you have any advice for those that need to rest, or maybe those that don't want to hear that they need to rest.
Oh my gosh, you bring up such a wonderful question. I mean, there's so many different directions we can angle this question at. But let's be real, the burnout is real. A lot of my students that I work with are experiencing that at its fullest. I mean, sometimes they come into my session with me and I'm always like, how's your week going? 99% of the time it's like, I'm exhausted and I'm just here because I need accountability to get this stuff done. And so when I think about folks who are maybe in that stage of burnout or maybe even feeling that coming on, I think it's so important to listen to yourself, notice those signals. And there's a lot of different folks who might operate in different ways for what that burnout looks like. I know for me, I might get really irritable. Other people kind of shut down and don't want to talk to others. So noticing what those patterns of behavior are for burnout is kind of that first signal we talk about. But I think I kind of refer to restorative justice in this moment, is finding your cheerleaders and your network is going to help recharge or fill your cup back up. And this kind of goes more into like the wellness factor of working with students. But I oftentimes think about what you're doing is enough. And there's ways that we can discuss even just your classwork in terms of experience building. I do see a lot of students who work full time to afford school and are taking their classes, and that's enough. Adult learners who maybe have families at home and can't get involved through internships or experiential learning. And I think there is a great way that we can think about what are we doing right now that's already building up these skills that I can think about, and what might I be willing to give up to transfer into another area to build the skills that I want to build. And that might not always be manageable for someone, but if that is an area that they're looking to get at, so that we're not putting more on that person's plate, but more thinking about how can maybe I've built some very strong skills here and I feel confident in it. I might feel attached to this role, but I'm ready for that next step and willing to let this thing go into another area. And it looks different for each individual. All of my students I work with have a different capacity for how much they can handle on their plate. But I think finding that community of cheerleaders, that restorative justice circle for you, that's going to help you recharge, really key for that portion. And that could be career counselors, it could be peers in your classroom, your family, but also having those conversations about what am I already doing that is helping me get to that next step. And so thinking about your classwork, the things that you're already involved with through volunteer that is transferable into that next field too. I kind of rambled there a little bit, but yeah, a lot of different angles to take that question on. But I definitely empathize a lot with those students who are doing a lot within their everyday life. And I think there's a lot of climate anxiety within this type of work, and that's heavy in itself. So being able to balance all of that is very admirable from my point of view as well.
Stay tuned later today for our panel on climate anxiety. Also, I want to say that I have a severe disagree about any rambling there. I really love that wisdom that you were just able to share with us. I'm going to butcher a quick story. I just saw a TikTok that was talking about advice for working moms. And the idea was you're juggling too many things. And some of the balls that you're juggling are made of plastic, and some of the balls that you're juggling are made of glass. And your job is to figure out which balls are plastic, which balls are glass. Because if you miss an important event for your kid, that's a glass that may shatter and you can't get that back. Whereas if you miss something smaller, that's a plastic ball, and you know what, you can try again tomorrow. And the same the other direction, that with work, there's some deadlines or responsibilities or relationships that are glass. There's also some that are plastic. And learning to kind of be okay with the fact you're doing too much, you're doing a lot, you're gonna drop some balls, try to make them plastic. And I closed down TikTok after that and just had to think for a minute, because I just really love that advice. So I'd maybe like to zoom it out to everyone about maybe you have some advice about identifying where the glass balls are versus the plastic balls, or maybe you could just share a little bit about like what brings you joy, or, oh my gosh, I love The best parts of virtual conferences are the pet photo bombs. So thank you so much for that, Alisha. Maybe you can share just like something that is bringing you joy or helps center you. You're all environmentalists doing the thing. Something that maybe helps you stay centered as you're engaging in this work.
Something that helps me stay centered is definitely the rapport building aspect of my role. I think that, nonprofit inherently is just a lot to navigate and can definitely lead to burnout. But I'm very lucky in the sense of my role is all about building rapport with core members and again, building them up. And so that rapport building provides avenues for me to socialize in a way that's different than if I just like came home and hung out with my significant other. So I find that definitely fills my cup up and helps me in this work.
I think for me, I've learned when climate anxiety strikes or when things feel so overwhelming, like for me, what's really grounding is anything that's tactile and anything that like roots me to this moment in time. And so, sorry, yes, my cat really wants to be part of this meeting. So I think a couple examples of those for me, cooking, especially if I'm like cooking something that needs to have a lot of veggies chopped up, which is kind of annoying, but it forces me to just slow down and be present in the moment. Doing yoga and like any type of like deep breath work, and then just like any time outside is usually really grounding for me. Forces me, especially if I'm not using earbuds, if I'm just listening, it kind of forces me to be present in the physical space that I'm in and the surroundings. So that's what I've realized really works for me when I feel that overwhelm start to creep in.
If you'd like to go first, Badral, I'll finish this up here.
Yeah, no, I guess we're in Mongolia rather lucky because it's a pretty big country, roughly the size of Alaska, but only 3 million people. And I live in a city where half of that 3 million lives. So, it's as in any big city, you have situations, not just to do with the work, but, this developing economy, tons of cars, the traffic, the air pollution and all that. But the beauty of Mongolia is, you drive half an hour outside of the city, you're in the middle of nowhere, really. And that's what really, puts everything in perspective and reminds you why it's important that, we do what we do. So yeah, going out to the nature is, I think, the biggest, charger and reminder, I guess, for all of us.
Definitely echo that. I kind of take two different routes as a counselor and like what I do in my work. I do have a wall behind myself when I'm normally in my office that's covered with notes from my students. And that's just kind of a reminder of the impact of the work that I have. I think when I was in marine bio and a bit more climate action work, I used to sit down and watch ocean documentaries that originally sparked my passion in the work. And that was kind of a reminder to me of like, even during those really roughest days, I'm still really passionate about this. And it's really still cool to watch octopus do their thing or like, sharks, whatever. That would always just like re-spark a passion for me and get me all excited about it again, even in those really defeating moments.
Thank you all. I want to go on a walk after this. Badral, I'd love to talk to you a little bit more about Mongolia's national parks. Can you tell us about the goals that you have for them? I believe you're looking for a pretty large percentage of the land in Mongolia is to be national parks. Can you tell us all about that?
Sure. As I mentioned earlier, Mongolia was, in part of the Soviet bloc, but post 1990, when Mongolia became democratic, we set an ambitious goal turning 30% of the land mass into national parks. And it's actually, we're rather successful in implementing that. And we're currently at about 21%. And given the size of the territory, it's, rather nice. But the whole reason why the Mongol Ecology Center was, we, decided to start it was that unfortunately, all these parks exist on the paper. I mean, even like great countries like the US, usually talk about shortage of funding and, especially as it comes to environment. And you can just imagine how tough it is in Mongolia because first of all, there are not that many people, but also it's just a small developing economy. We have different, perspectives and challenges, and we believe in the great future. But still, in the meantime, somebody has to, instead of just sitting back and criticizing the government, we decided, even something, just if we can change life of one ranger, that counts. So that's how we started actually, and I guess on this panel we talk about youth and environmental education. So I don't want to focus too much on the work with parks and the work with adults we do. I mean, it's a big part of what we do, but still, in the meantime, working with ministers and the political systems, you're fed up and you need this recharging, quite often. But then, in the meantime, you learn that you invest something into kids, and the reward is like immediate, and that also actually reminds you of why it is important, and there is hope because. While this minister is not going to change anything, in 20 years, this kid might be the next minister. And that's how our Junior Rangers program, within our organization started. It's been 10 years now. And, it focuses on the middle, school kids who live in these gateway communities in the parks. And then once we started doing this, it was amazing. We just wanted to create something, an environment that the kids do not have at their home or their communities. So we, organized, one of our components is Junior Rangers Programs components is a summer camp, which is very, very popular. And the summer camps are organized in a way that a small group of 4 to 5 students, they have one national counselor as well as one international counselor. Usually, as a Peace Corps volunteer or somebody who speaks English. And in this global trend of, set by, the US or English-speaking cultures, everybody speaks a little bit nowadays. So, getting in this environment where there is this foreigner you can talk to, you can address your, challenges or anxieties. It is something that it's just unheard of. So that became a very, it was such a great success that we really wanted to work more with kids. And actually, our Junior Ranger, alumni, they pressured us to continue and, start another program for the high schoolers and students. And the second, that program has become even more successful. I don't want to brag about just this innovation, but
well, you should brag.
But so if you give me a couple more minutes, it's so the Junior Rangers program actually kind of evolved into what we call the Youth Sustainability Corps. And as I mentioned, our focus initially was just one big park in northern Mongolia, where there's this big lake, freshwater lake, containing 70% of all of Mongolia's freshwater. And that's why we thought it was very important to, have these kids be proud of, where they live and why they should care about the purity of this water. But thanks to this Youth Sustainability Corps program, And in a way, thanks to COVID, we have to digitize all of our content. And while we were, identified 6 national parks, 6 schools in gateway communities to start our youth sustainability core, because everything was digitized and we couldn't go and visit the schools. Everything went on, digital platform, and as a result, it's in all 21 provinces or like states, in Mongolia. We have, 30,000+ youth, following our programs, and they keep us on our toes to keep it interesting, keep it, focused. So it's a very small organization. We have, 5 people working day to day, on the program. So you can just imagine how big of a pressure it's. But in the meantime, we're learning that obviously we're not alone. The U.S. Park Service was one of our stars, sort of. We wanted to learn from. And while working there, environmental youth programs, amazing. And that's how we worked with several groups to improve our curriculums, and I had some volunteers, interns from other countries. But yeah, now it's just amazing to be learning in so much detail, what you guys do and what kind of challenges you have. And a lot of them are very similar. And while it's a different continent, different circumstances, I think we can learn quite a bit from each other. And then especially as it comes to EarthCorps, we've been hearing so much great stuff about the organization, and one of our newest sub programs we want to launch is trail building, and that's what exactly what. And it's not just physical building trails. It's again, helping young people to decide on their future careers, or even go through some mental challenges. I mean, you name it. It's turns out it's such a great big field. And again, I just really want to thank you for giving me opportunity to learn on behalf of my colleagues. What's how you guys deal with this around the US.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Stay tuned, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow for our panel on trail building across the world and our organizational spotlight on the Transcaucasian Trail. We're really excited to dive into what do sustainable but accessible trails look like. I love that little segue, so I just had to say something. I also really love, I want to jump back into the Junior Rangers program in a second, but I love how you brought up the international experience. We're talking about this panel generally as global leaders, thinking about in the future, they will be on a global scale, but that international global perspective can start a lot earlier. I think of a summer camp that I used to go to, and having some international camp counselors was really formative and kind of opening my eyes a little bit. I worked in a residence hall that was specifically for international students who were teenagers in high school. And the magic of the conflicts and the collaboration and the joy and the sharing of cultures was so formative for me, even as a staff member, and has really informed some of the work that I do now. I'd love to hear if anybody has maybe a story of an international experience, maybe you going somewhere or some other folks coming to you that formed you maybe at a young age, or something that in your work now, something that the international component, I'm sure any of you that you'd bump up against that. Chris with the international cohort at EarthCorps, Gigi with your college, I'm sure there are some internationals there that we see that global perspective already popping up in our day-to-day. So would love to hear from anyone if you have maybe an anecdote about how that formed you, or how you're seeing that form the culture in the work you're doing today.
I will step in here, maybe. our university has probably one of the highest rates of university students who go and study abroad. We do have a very high number of international students as well. But my office is right next to our study abroad and international student office on campus. And so I see a lot of those students as we kind of partner with them to talk about how do we discuss about a global perspective through career development. And so talking about how are, getting ourselves out of our comfort zone and learning about different cultural practices and experiences outside of our comfort zone of maybe, the US traditional ways of doing things. What is that challenging us to learn? And I find that really fascinating how students take away different pieces from that. Not all of my students work in environmental sciences, they might be in medical fields or, I have art history students too. And so it's really fascinating to see how they are connecting their field of work into whatever location they're heading out to. And I would say that global perspective has been such a pivotal piece for a lot of our students, for seeing how they're building these connections of what we're doing in the US versus maybe, they're heading out to Indonesia or maybe they're heading to Spain, and what they're learning from those different practices as well, and what those differences and commonalities are. And I think that kind of challenges them to open their minds a little bit to a different way of doing things, which I think is really cool.
I had a story that came to mind. I got to take a class in college about tropical agriculture in Costa Rica, which was a really amazing class. My undergrad degree is in sustainable regenerative agriculture. And we met with a lot of local farmers, and we got to hear some stories of folks who had become dependent on US markets and US seed sourcing. And just there were a lot of roadblocks and complications with some of that, with the markets changing or not having access to, this specific variety of hybrid seed that you can't seed harvest on your own. You're dependent on buying it from that company. And I think that really opened my mind, or just introduced me to this idea of like the beauty of the global connection, but also the need to be rooted in your specific region and area that you're working in, especially for working in like agriculture and food distribution and things like that. And I think too, something I know, Brandon, or I'm assuming EarthCorps would promote is like global doesn't mean US centric, global means global. And so like, we don't have all the answers. We don't have the right way of thinking about things. We really do need all these different types of perspectives, and we need the ideas that come from people who grow up in different circumstances than we do. And we need all of those ideas to come together to kind of address the climate crisis. It needs to be global and it needs to be local, because the climate crisis is manifesting in so many different ways in each region, depending on, their climate and their geological features and stuff like that. So that was a really formative experience for me, just to get to learn from these farmers who, some of them like never went to high school, but they had created just the most ingenious like feats of engineering on their farm for like automatic watering or different things like that. So that was a really cool experience, and yay, study abroad, do it when you can. So piggyback on Gigi's story.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, Brandon, we do have an international cohort that joins us in June. Unfortunately, I started with EarthCorps about 7 months ago, and so I came in right when the international cohort was leaving, and I didn't get to experience that. But hearing all of your stories makes me incredibly excited to welcome our new international cohort that will again be joining us in June. Some of the things, huh? Oh,
I just said apply now. We're accepting applications. Will we see you in June? I hope so. Sorry, Chris,
Great.
continue. I didn't know.
No, loved it. That's exactly what needed to happen right there. But some of the experiences that I heard from current Corps members that was incredibly beneficial with interacting with individuals from all across the world was this idea of cross-cultural communication. And then also, talking about how different countries are enacting or targeting climate change. So yeah, I am just looking forward to this and really, really excited.
Yeah, no, I think having different perspectives is always, adds value to anything. And I was lucky, in my early 20s, I ended up in Australia in tourism management school. And it was an international course, and two groups, about 60 students representing about 50 countries. So that was like a melting pot. And one of our, subjects that I vividly remember was called the regional aspects. And we always talked about one issue, but the solutions, depending on where you go, they're different. And every student contributed, and that was quite amazing. And me being from this nomadic country, very scarcely populated, I grew up, with parents or grandparents, telling different, wisdoms that were passed through different generations, and a lot of them were to do with traveling and being open-minded and being able to adjust. And one this proverb that's stuck to me until now is it's kind of funny, but it goes like a traveling fool can be wiser than a sitting scholar, meaning you can study the books all you want, but then if you haven't seen those places or you haven't done those things with your hands, it's just not the same. It just gives being able to travel and meet people and hear people from different backgrounds and different perspectives, I think that's what makes our work valuable and then more impactful, because when we talk about conservation and environmentalism, there are no state borders. And that's when we have to realize, and when you talk to kids and youth, that they get it right away. Unfortunately, the politicians and the adults like us, myself, not so much, unfortunately.
Thank you so much. I'd love to go back to the Junior Ranger program. You told me when we've spoken before that an emerging thing that you're doing is digital literacy. Talk to me about that. How did a Junior Ranger program in the national parks pivot to digital literacy, and what does that literacy look like?
On this discussion, we talked about TikTok and different technologies we use these days on day-to-day basis. And while Mongolia is big in a way that there are once you go outside of this big city, there are not that many settlements you bump into. Even the settlements you go to, they have just a few hundred people in them. But as opposed to even 10 years ago, I think this cellular connections and internet, they have added so much to our daily lives. Now politicians and polls dependent on social media and what public thinks about certain issues. So again, when we were faced with the challenge of working with our junior rangers as well as the youth during the pandemic, we had to just turn into technology, and we did this quite comprehensive study. We were lucky to secure some funding to do it, but close to 1,000 students participated together with their parents and teachers, and as a result, we just try to identify different mediums that through which you can, reach those kids. And yeah, no, it's in this and in the 21st century, with no digital platforms, with no internet, I mean, pretty much nothing is possible. And that's why we're starting a second phase of this youth program as we speak. And for the next couple of years, we want to focus on creating more digital tools and means to reach the kids. And I think the national parks come in where you have, again, given the scarcity of the population and big parks and no borders, no like rangers to be there. But even if you have like a smartphone and you can download an app which will tell you what to do, not to do, and whom to call if in case of emergencies and things like that. And that is I think very crucial. And who else but the kids and the youth who will they are teaching their parents, they're teaching the rangers. We do have some sessions working with different representatives of different communities and different parks. And yeah, that's when kids have to take that leadership role and teach the adults how to utilize on those technologies. So yeah, as we're speaking, we're learning. So there are no answers. And if any one on this panel, but whoever is listening, has some ideas on how to utilize on digital technology, we're really open to your ideas, because as we said earlier, we just want to hear many people and do something that will be impactful, hopefully.
I love that. I've been actually reflecting recently on, I used to, when I was younger, I laughed at older generations who started getting their news on Facebook. I was like, why would you do that? Why would it look that way? And then I started getting my news from like TikTok and Twitter, and I was like, oh, okay, something's packaged for me a little bit. This is how I'm engaging with things. This is bad. I need to go back to the sources. And then realizing that Twitter and TikTok have actually been excellent tools to get first person experiences, that instead of a filtration of other things, if you find the right people, they're sharing things in places that otherwise we might not hear those stories. There's an opportunity, but it requires that digital literacy to be able to figure out, where is this information coming from, who stands to gain what from it. It's a scary landscape to try to navigate, as it seems that not everybody has your best interest in mind, or not everybody has truth in mind. So I love to hear about the ways that you're doing that, and how not only we're preparing the next generation, but that generation is like helping to prepare the older generations for the realities that they're facing. That's such a cool program to hear about. Alisha, I want to throw it back to you, because you have such an interesting and varied background. Starting with, I have to mention summer camp, where you and I met how many years ago? And then from there, corporate sustainability, molecular and cell biology, volunteering communications, nutrition, sustainability analysis. You've been all over the place doing like incredibly fascinating things, kind of doing what some of Gigi was talking about, where careers don't necessarily look the way that they might have looked traditionally. I want to hear from you that varied career experience in a lot of different areas that kind of fall under the same umbrella. How has doing that large variety of tasks influenced maybe your education techniques, or influenced maybe the way that you view careers now?
Yeah, I could have my own like private monologue about this. It's like 10 years of my life. I was laughing when Gigi was talking about having career crises in my case, and when Chris was talking about failing forward, because I feel like both of those are pretty good descriptors, excuse me, of my 20s. But like you said, Brandon, I've tried a lot of different things. I'm so grateful. I think for a while I viewed that as a failure. Like I viewed success as like staying in a job, growing, you know, climbing the ladder, being in leadership. But looking back, most days now I'm able to see how that career path was really what I needed. I am interested in so many things and I have a pretty high aptitude for many things. So the whole like filter down to the one thing you care about or the one thing you're good at, like filter didn't really work for me. Which kind of led me to just keep following curiosities and keep trying new things. And some of that too, as I was reflecting on this question, some of that too is like life, COVID, getting married, you know, all these other different things that are happening in my life. And just want to acknowledge for other folks who are tuning in, you know, family things. And there are just so many things outside of just this is what I'm interested in that impact where we work and what we choose to do for work. And I don't think that gets called out enough. But yeah, I've tried a lot of different things. As I was trying to say, like, what are like the core themes through all of my kind of passions and all the things I've tried, I think I boiled it down to science, words, and food. So I love science. I've always been curious. I love writing and talking and communicating with words, and I love eating and I love talking about food and where food comes from. And I have my own journeys with what eating looks like and what food has looked like for me. So I think I am grateful that I've had the freedom to experiment. And if anyone, you know, on this panel feels like they're in a lost, or sorry, not on the panel. You guys are all great. You're all solid. Anyone tuning in to this, this discussion, if you are feeling a little bit lost or you're feeling like your career path isn't like a clear arrow pointing at something, I hope I can just be a word of peace that that's okay. And that you're finding your way, and it's a little tricky out here, but you know, we're doing our best. And I don't think I'm done trying new things. I think I'm going to continue exploring. Someone told me that your 20s are for experimenting, and specifically in relation in regard to work. And so I decided that instead of paying money to experiment in the classroom, I was going to earn money by experimenting in the workplace. So that's been my take. And once again, I talked so long, I forgot what the question was. Brandon, am I good? Do we hit it?
It was perfect. It was perfect.
Okay.
My questions are so unimportant. What you all say is really what we're here for. I love that. I love that you're embracing curiosity. And I hope, yeah, like you said, that all of us on the panel, all of us watching, feel emboldened to do that, that we should follow our curiosity because there's something there. If something's making your brain light up, like follow that. Maybe that means something like what Gigi said of like expanding your network, getting involved. That could be a club, a community center. If you're in college, if you're out of college, if you're in high school, there are other people whose brains light up at the same thing. And being able to find those and build that community, it feels good. Chris, hey, I'd love to turn it back over to you again. Before you've been, by the way, absolutely killing it as the core operations manager at EarthCorps. You talked about how you were working at the heart of Oregon core, specifically by perusing your LinkedIn. I saw that you worked to craft some social and emotional learning curriculum. I'm fascinated. Please tell us more.
I'm so happy you said you found that out by perusing my LinkedIn, because I was like, how does he know that? LinkedIn, duh. Yeah, so I did help create some of the social emotional learning curriculum we had at Heart of Oregon Core. And that curriculum incorporated a multitude of topics that ranged from navigating relationships, different communication styles, understanding various levels of escalation within ourselves, and utilizing tools to self-regulate. So literally a wide range of topics that we covered. But what was really interesting about implementing this this education was the youth, the group of individuals that we were delivering this to. And so we worked with a variety of youth from different backgrounds at different points in their life. But in particular, I think it's important to note that it was youth who were mostly 16 to 18 years old. And so, you know, these individuals are just starting out in this idea of social emotional learning. This is like a very new concept. Talking about it makes no sense. Like, that's weird. We don't talk about it. It's taboo. So some of the things that we tried to implement to make the conversation go more smoothly were things like rapport building. We really established a lot of rapport building ahead of time so that we could like utilize each other's relationships when having hard discussions and call in instead of calling out. Some other tools that we utilized were, again, like some of the tools that naturally just came through the education of, you know, understanding when you're escalated, how to self-regulate, etc. And then in addition, we also utilize creating shared language and shared values when having this conversation. So it really, really helped having that foundation when implementing this work. I mean, it wasn't always smooth, but it was really fun. And I think it had the impact that we were looking for.
Awesome. If you want to send those like lessons over for me to learn, that would be lovely. Thank you so much. I'd love to throw this next question to Gigi, and then I want to start with you, but then I want to broaden it to anyone else who might have a thought. We've talked a lot about like leadership and mentorship and the role that other people can have in our lives. Gigi, do you have advice for someone who wants to find a mentor, who wants that type of intentional relationship, but maybe doesn't know where to start or how to ask?
Yeah, oh, that's a good question. There's a lot of different places. It kind of depends on maybe where you're at. I think it looks different for different age ranges, perhaps, or maybe what connection you're in. I'll start because I work with university students. And I actually earlier today just received a text from my aunt who was like, I'm working with a client right now, freshman in college, really needing some support right now. And I think sometimes we look to our family or friends because those might be the first people we are in contact with, but oftentimes it's great to find a neutral ground as well. I'm always a big advocate for, you know, chatting with your teachers and seeing what connections they might have. There's also a lot of resources, particularly at universities, such as like academic counselors, career counselors, mental health counselors, and you can find that mentorship in a lot of different ways. I know that myself as a counselor versus some of our other counselors, my approach is very different. You know, I come from a more, you know, I'm closer in age to my students. I am a pretty bubbly person, whereas we have some counselors who are a bit more introverted. And so finding who that right approach for you and a mentor is one thing I would keep in mind, or like kind of what are your goals out of a mentorship relationship, and how do you like to receive feedback as well. As a mentor, sometimes I'll have students who are like, I need you to be super direct with me. Tell me exactly what I got to do. That's not my normal approach. I am more of a counselor than a coach, versus other people, you know, they really like that soft approach. Like, tell me I'm doing really great, and then tell me what I need to work on. I need the compliment sandwich. And so that I think is part of the process when you think about mentorship as well. But finding a mentor can be in a lot of different ways. I know for me, I just found mine through just natural involvements over time. They oftentimes were supervisors that I had. I didn't necessarily have someone in particular who was my designated mentor, but it kind of naturally happened through relationship building. I know Chris was talking a lot about just like rapport. So as you head into these new spaces, whatever those involvements are, whether it's through your academics or other things, volunteer, starting to build relationships with people and seeing maybe who really speaks to you, and like maybe you build that relationship and that community really strong there, and those become those people that naturally become mentors over time. That's kind of how my approach had been. I wish I had a more solid answer of like, go to this website and there's all the mentors there, but realistically, that's kind of how I find a lot of folks are finding mentorship over the years, just because it looks different for everyone. Everyone has a unique need and approach towards mentorship as well.
I think one thing I'll add to what Gigi said, I think that's like probably exactly what I would have all the ways I would have said of just the casual ways, like doing stuff you're interested in, volunteering places, supervisors at work, all of those types of folks. I think too with mentorship, it can be or feel so scary to ask someone or feel so formal to ask someone to be a mentor. But when I've been on that side of the coin, like I have been so honored and flattered that someone would like want that from me and like be like interested in talking to me more even. And so I think having that perspective or that little like piece of comfort in your mind, like this person is probably going to be like delighted that I asked them this, can take a little bit of the fear out of it, a little bit of the edge off. And it also, if mentorship feels too formal, I think Gigi's point about coming in with some clear goals is really good. If you just want to sit down and have coffee with someone and ask them about their career or how they got to where they got to, like that can all fall under mentorship, even if it's more informal. So I think just like figuring out what you need for where you're at and being okay with it looking a little different than maybe the traditional like rigid mentorship idea we might have floating around in our heads, and then just taking the courage to be like, I'm just gonna ask them, like, what's the worst that can happen? Because they're probably gonna be pumped and then it's gonna be great. So
I love that you said that, Alisha. It's actually kind of funny because I was thinking about my mentor and currently how I view my supervisor as my mentor. And we've never actually said it. Like, I've never said, can you be my mentor? It's just like naturally happened and it's kind of an unspoken word. So yeah, truly appreciate mentorships that just like naturally occur. I'm also thinking about it from the perspective of like a mentor, and something that's like coming up for me through this conversation is recognizing that like relationship over the role is really important. I know that my role naturally just builds relationships with all the core members in our organization, but I think it's also important for me to take a step back whenever there are other mentoring opportunities as well. And so, you know, like in terms of looking at it from the perspective of a mentor, not taking offense if somebody doesn't look to you for mentorship, but instead be happy if they find it in someone else. So that was another thought I had.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with all of you, and I think just a little bit of a different angle, in the line of work we do is offering a different channel, so to say, or opportunities to especially kids in rural areas is that's what seems to be very important, because they cannot channel it through their relatives or the teachers or peers, but needed some complete stranger who's there to conduct some short training or during the summer camps. And I think that's also quite valuable, because they feel when in the smaller communities each other, it's really tough to kind of talk about certain issues, but when you have an opportunity to talk to somebody who will not just make fun of you, or maybe even just will leave in a couple of days. I think having different options is always good.
Absolutely. I love that we were kind of naturally talking about from the mentor's perspective. I'd love to throw it to all of you. What are some things that you think older generations have to learn from some of these emerging generations? Or what is something you've learned from a student or a kid that is in your neighborhood, or someone that you supervise? What are some lessons or things that like we can glean from them?
I am a firm believer that I learn just as much from my students as they do from me. In fact, I feel like they teach me more than I teach them some of the times. But I I would say some of the themes that I'm seeing, even just within, I'll kind of focus mostly on environmental and climate action here. When I work with my students there, I sometimes think back to when I was first emerging into the field of environmental science and getting excited about marine bio. It was like whales and sharks, and that's super cool. Now I'm seeing it's a lot more complex than that. There's a lot of students who are coming in who have this full awareness that the environment impacts everyone, and it's not just the environment, it's social justice intertwined, intersecting with environmental justice, and how that can impact different communities differently, particularly lower income or already vulnerable communities might be impacted by climate change a little bit more so. And I think this complex idea of this ever-changing climate action, environmental science piece is beyond just, this is a cool animal and I want to learn about it, is a theme that I am seeing very strong in all of my environmental science students. Right now it's like grad school application season. So a lot of my students I'm working with are applying to grad school, and almost all of them are talking about, it's not just environmental science, it's conservation, it's sustainability, it's climate action, advocacy, policy change, and it's these much deeper concepts that connect to environmental science. And I think having come from that background of when I started in, I was like, oh my gosh, cool, this is super great, like it's gonna be fun. And then going through the work myself of getting that degree, I realized it was a lot more complex than that. And I'm seeing students coming in as first year students with already that background and knowledge. They're way beyond where I was when I came in as a first year student. And they're teaching me a lot about that as well, of like, you know, here's how I'm using conversations on fast fashion to educate folks, or here's how I'm talking about veganism and our food as an approach. And they're taking these niche ideas that connect to environmental conservation and expanding and running with that. And it's so cool because it's so much deeper and it's integrated and meshing with everything that we do in our everyday lives. And I just find that fascinating. And I'm so glad that they talk about it as much as they do.
Yeah, I want to echo that. I feel like I'm always learning from our core members and learning more than they learn from me. And again, wanting to take this back to like more of a soft skills approach. If you were talking to our field team, you would hear more about like the hard skills, environmental part of it. But my role being so much focused on just like the core member experience, I definitely have learned a lot about accountability within a relationship. And so yeah, finding that balance of building a relationship and then holding each other accountable and meeting each other halfway and recognizing that halfway might look different for different relationships is something I've learned a lot. And I've also, in addition, learned just multiple ways of communication and how important it is to provide to ask people how they want feedback, and to ask for the same thing. So we both have this relationship where we both give each other parts. So yeah, there's a lot that I'm learning when it comes to rapport building.
I think one thing for me, especially with the littles, like the first graders, especially, they keep you real humble. And I think that's something just, I guess, just their curiosity, and they don't function in the silos or the boxes of thinking that we have kind of conditioned ourselves to as adults. And so everyone's familiar with the trope of like the kids like, well, why? And then you give them the answer and they're like, but why? And then, you know, and it just like continues. But truly, like that curiosity and that just desire to understand the world, I think we can lose that as we age because we think we have it figured out, or we kind of have these formulas for things. And so I think something that I've really been learning from my kiddos, and that just continually the younger generation has to teach us, is to keep asking why and to keep being curious and not to settle for the pat answers that maybe don't really answer the question. And I think that type of curiosity is what is going to bring about like more scientific discoveries, more solutions, more fresh ideas. So that's something that I think I've learned and will continue to learn from the next gen.
I just want to say I am so happy you said that. Sorry. That's really exciting because that is also another thing that I definitely learned from our core members. In previous roles that I've worked in, I've had people often ask the why, and I've had fellow coworkers get kind of, I don't know, frustrated with always being asked the why, and I've seen that, like, when parents have newborn children, or not newborn children, when parents have children and they're always like, but why? And like, stop asking why, and I just really love that you said that we should not be doing that we should be encouraging that and the curiosity. And that's something that I love so much about the younger generations is they're not afraid to ask the why. They're not afraid to keep learning. They're not afraid to challenge the process. So yeah, that just made me really excited.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add that while we're digitizing our content, we talked about like creating this series of short educational videos, on the environment and pollution, and dispersing through to the youth. And in my head, being in my 50s, short video would be like 15-20 minutes, something, maybe 30 minutes. But turns out, especially as we target kids in rural settlements, the amount of data on their cell phones they can use, it starts ticking as soon as they hit the video play button. But before that, they have like a second and a half of this video kind of running for free, and that's what you have to target, turns out. So again, in our work, I mostly concentrate on administrative part, but then it's the younger people, who I don't know, had international exposures, but as we mentioned before, worked in different industries, but for various reasons they ended up under the umbrella of this Mongol Ecology Center, and we do this environmental work, and in particular the young professionals in their late 20s and early 30s who are like managing certain programs. They want to involve more. I mean, they say, we are old. I mean, we feel we are old for these kids to talk to them. So we need, even younger people. So it's an ongoing process, and we learn from each other. And I think it's important that, as we talked again, having different people chipping in.
That was such terrible timing that I realized I had a cough coming right as I'm supposed to talk. Hi, thank you. I want to continue this conversation forever, but I promised you all I wouldn't do that. So I want to ask 1.5 final questions. Where are you feeling hope right now in your work?
Lots of different places. I feel like every day there's a moment of excitement when I work with students. I love that a lot of the students I work with are very driven and they truly care about what they do. Again, I do work with students outside of environmental and ocean sciences, but I think that passion and getting to see that out of my students, we have like kind of an opt-in opportunity here where they're not required to come see career counselors. They're doing it out of their own will. And oftentimes I get to see the most passionate students out there. We do a lot of outreach to ensure like our first generation students have that access. We actually just had a first generation event today, which was very exciting. But seen as environmental and I think STEM fields have and still are very dominated by privileged identities, it excites me to work with a very diverse group of students in college studying environmental sciences right now. So not only am I seeing that representation in the students, but it's starting to reflect on the faculty as well. And a lot of the faculty and the students are excited about challenging that norm, and building more representation, building more accessibility and equitability within this field, and just making it exciting for everyone to be involved with. There is a lot of barriers for folks being involved. We talked about cost in the past, as well as just like getting out and having the access to go out into nature as well. And so getting to see these folks challenging the norm, and excited about that, and then asking those why questions, all of the above, gives me a lot of hope that this generation is incredible change makers. And I love watching that process, and I love being a part of the process and empowering them to go off and do that. And I really try, like when I have students who are like, well, should I do this? Should I do this? I'm like, let's focus on what excites you the most, and let's drive that forward. I'm never going to tell you no, like you can't do that thing. Let's see what we can do to get to that dream goal in the end as well. And so that gives me a lot of hope to see the spark of excitement in my students.
Okay, let me. I'm in, as I mentioned, our prime focus is on, improving the capacity of national parks around the country in Mongolia. And, most of the time, you deal with adults, with politicians and the supposed change makers. But it can be really, really frustrating. You feel like, you just make 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards, or even 2 steps backward. And, after 10 plus years, sometimes you feel like you haven't done much because, it just all boils down to these politicians who decide on, what to do or not to do. And, that they change every 4 years and things like that. But then when we started the children's program as well as the youth program, that's when I think everybody who was involved with the Mongol Ecology Center and all of our programs was so much recharged. And we just, because all this there's I don't know, like a 10-year-old kid who from rural northern Mongolia who participated in our first ever junior ranger camp. He's she went to she went on to study in a university in in Ulaanbaatar, the capital, and choosing the environmental science. And then following that trait, you see, I don't know, about a dozen different kids from different parts of the country who care about these issues, and they are the change makers, and that's what really keeps us going, I think. So it's important, it's very important.
I love everything that has been mentioned so far. In particular, something that's really exciting with the work that EarthCorps is doing is, again, to tie it back with these 3 pillars that EarthCorps loves to use as the basis of framework is leadership, community, and habitat. I'm so excited to see the leaders that are coming out of EarthCorps, and I know that they're an example of Generation Z, and I don't know, it's just incredibly exciting to see the skills and what they've focused on. And when it comes to community, although COVID made community really hard and not as easily accessible to a lot of people, it's really cool to see that it's still a huge component of younger generations and something that people want to create. And then when it comes to habitat, EarthCorps has just centered our mission around environmental justice and having that at the forefront of our mission. And so with these leaders that we have in EarthCorps, they're always asking the why, they're always questioning the process and challenging the process. And it's really cool because it's helping EarthCorps move through this process of wanting to be more environmentally just. We're very much at the beginning of that process, but our core members are definitely helping with that process. So just a lot of exciting stuff.
I feel like all of these panel answers are my answer, I'm like, oh, it's so cool to hear about everything and just hear from different folks working in different industries. I'm gonna cheat and give two because I definitely like the intersectional environmentalist, which is coined by Leah Thomas. If you aren't familiar with her, read her book and follow her on Instagram. Shout out. Yes, amazing. Just
It is
that
not product placement. That was not planned. That
was we were Chris and I, man, we were
that's good.
in sync. But yeah, just the tying in conservation and the environmental movement in with social justice issues is like been so necessary for so long and was not that connection was not made. And so I'm just so happy that we're in a space now where we're understanding those ties, and a lot of organizations like EarthCorps are like codifying that in like who they are in their mission, and I am just so delighted to see that happen because I think yeah, part of the environmental movement needs to be equity. So that is giving me hope, just seeing that even, you know, other corporations and more people talking about that. And then again, just like when my littles are excited about science, when they're like asking me if I'm a scientist, and when I ask them if they want to do science and they're like, I love science, like that just makes me so happy and gives me hope. You know, I mean, they're probably just excited about everything, but I hope that some of them will, some of this will stick and they will grow up and they will pursue careers in science and will bring some of those unique perspectives. So those are two things bringing me hope.
I want to say a huge thank you to each of you for sharing your time and your talents with us during this panel. The purpose of this panel was to talk about how we can equip and mentor and inspire the next generation, but I feel like you have done so much just to inspire me personally. So thank you for being here. Your work is tough and rewarding, sometimes probably a little thankless, but the world is filled with a lot more light because of it. Thank you so much for being with us.